Hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank all transit providers and transit agencies who participated in the NRCan interview series. And as promised, we have 5 deliverables. We call them Knowledge Series 1 to 5 that I will share with you in terms of, or in the form of a technical report, PowerPoint presentation, and recorded webinar. So feel free to distribute the material to any stakeholder in the Canadian transit industry or even in North American transit industry. So let me start off by acknowledging the NRCan Zero Electric Vehicle Awareness Initiative and thank them for the financial support to carry out this project. And also note that the opinions expressed throughout the presentation and throughout all knowledge series 1 to 5 represents our views and based on the research and does not necessarily reflect NRCan perspective on zero emission vehicle awareness in Canada. So the very first stage that we would like to tackle when we are speaking about zero electric vehicle application in transit is actually understanding the literature review, understanding what was done in terms of academic research and best practices, and highlight 2 very important categories. We call them research domain or knowledge domains. The first one represents saturated knowledge that could be easily transferred to the industry and could be implemented immediately. So there is very little to no risk of implementing this knowledge. And on the other side, we have something called knowledge gaps, which means that we require additional research efforts in order to fill these gaps, as well as transit providers or transit agencies should be a little bit cautious before applying these in daily practice. So what we actually did, we looked into the literature review of electric buses, starting from 2000 all the way until 2021, to be specific, May 21. We highlighted, as I just mentioned, saturated knowledge domains and knowledge gap. And then we will communicate the key take-home messages. And this will be communicated across 3 levels, 1 to transit industry, 1 for policymakers, and 1 for academic researchers. So in total, we reviewed 340 studies. We sorted out, or we downloaded roughly around 1,200 studies. But just to be very specific, we applied 2 different filtering mechanisms. One looking into studies that actually implemented on a case study, so it's not just theoretical, as well as fits our temporal distribution, being from 2000 all the way until May 2021, and also tackle electric buses, all forms of electric buses, so hydrogen, battery electric, fuel cell hydrogen, renewable natural gas. So here the word electric bus is inclusive of all different technologies. Out of these 340 studies, we downloaded all the text and we applied the so-called textual data analysis. 2 different forms of textual data analysis or analyses were implemented. The first one is literally reading through the articles, reading through the abstract objectives and findings, and trying to sort out the key conclusion and remarks for each article. And this was implemented manually. So 2 researchers actually reading all 340 studies. And the other one, we implemented the so-called machine learning based text analytic algorithm, which will actually analyze the textual data and produce the emergent themes or the emergent knowledge domain in a quantified manner. So it will give us numerical value for the weight for each research domain implemented in the literature. After we completed this approach for the textual data analysis, we moved on into analyzing knowledge domains and highlighting saturated knowledge versus knowledge gap, as well as understanding the intersectionality between different knowledge. So how many times 2 different knowledge domains are studied together in conjunction, or if there is a lack of intersectionality between 2 knowledge domains. So this is the distribution of the articles, and it's pretty obvious. As you can see here in the year 2000, we have only 3 articles, and then the attention, the academic attention to electric buses is growing exponentially. And you see that the articles are increasing significantly as we progress over the year. And I anticipate 2022, when we update our model, we will exceed the 150 or 150 plus for the number of papers published. So the key message that from a research perspective, as well as a practice perspective, transit electrification is receiving significant attention from academia as well as from the industry. So just very high level brief about how the machine learning analysis of textual data works. So this is basically a typical word cloud of all the text that we have analyzed, and you can see the most frequent words are actually the connection phrases. So what we do is, once we get into the raw data, we remove all connection phrases and kind of stripping the data corpus out of these connection phrases to clean our word and then clean our textual data, and then start doing our analysis. So again, this is word cloud. So this is the very first step before going into the machine learning text analysis. So when we apply the machine learning, I'm not speaking about the methodological contribution here, just focusing on the main domains. We extracted 10 knowledge domains or 10 topics that govern the research on electric vehicles internationally. And the data set represents all the entire world. So it's not only strict to the Canadian or North American context. So the first one, topic 1, is vehicle dynamics. And you can see it includes vehicle, system, motor, torque, and controller. So this is mainly a mechanical engineering perspective. Topic 2 is infrastructure systems, looking at the charging station special distribution and allocation, cost, fleet, infrastructure, DC fast charger versus slow charger, different technology, wireless, inductive, and different charging models. Operational factors that will impact the implementation as well as the utilization of electric buses, looking into time, city, different routes, network, how the demand, real world data, traffic condition, the trip level information, how this actually impacts the energy consumption of electric buses, which is topic 4, energy consumption, how energy consumption is estimated, looking into driving cycle, efficiency, range, regenerative braking, is it based on simulation or real world data. Topic 5 focuses mainly on power and utility impact, looking into how electric buses, specifically battery electric buses, might impact the utility grid, and how this will actually dictate the voltage regulation, tap settings, load distribution, and the required upgrade to the grid. Moving on to topic 6, focuses mainly on emission and cost, greenhouse gas emission, and the cost associated with this greenhouse gas emission. Topic 7 focuses on battery performance, and then we move on into optimization models, external factor, and comparative analysis of different case studies. So each of these topics receives a specific weight allocated to each topic to give their relative importance in terms of the literature. So out of the 10 topics, you can see on this slide that we have mainly 6 topics that are very popular when it comes into electric bus research and analysis. The first one, again, related to mechanical engineering, looking into the vehicle dynamic. From a transit perspective, infrastructure system is very well researched. Power and utility impact analysis is equally very well researched. Optimization models, battery performance, and I have a couple of comments on battery performance, and the energy consumption. So these 6 topics are very well studied in the literature, and the knowledge is ready to be transferred into practice. So we already know what's the battery performance under different like cycling, number of cycles for charge and discharge, and what's the fading percentage for each type of chemistry. So the lithium ion battery, what's the percentage of fading based on the number of charging cycles that it will experience, as well as based on the ambient temperature. If you're actually having like half of these charging cycles happening in the winter versus in the summer, what's the average temperature across the year? Similarly, energy consumption and the impact of all internal and external factors that will impact energy consumption is very well researched. This is also a neat visualization to understand the popularity of each topic over the time span. So we start at the year 2000 and end at 2021. And you can see that, for example, topic number 9, planning and external factor, was receiving significant attention at the beginning. And now it's kind of stable. So it's equally researched, similar to all other topics. In comparison, infrastructure system is receiving more attention as we progress over time. So there is more emphasis on infrastructure system and how we can optimize our infrastructure system to aid the implementation of electric buses. Similarly, here you have the emission and cost. So you kind of get a sense of how different topics are being researched and studied over the years. So this is one of the key contribution of this knowledge series, is actually looking into the topic intersectionality and understanding. If I'm putting myself or wearing two different hats. If I'm researching electric bus, which topics should receive my full attention? And if I'm actually a transit provider and applying or trying to adopt and implement electric buses in my system, which type of knowledge that I could actually implement without any additional risk? So you have a color code here. One, blue is good, means that topics are actually studied, very well studied together. And red, it means that these two topics are not studied together. So let's give a couple of examples. If we go into infrastructure system here, and their intersectionality with topic 6, which is emission and cost, you will see that it's very often when people research infrastructure system allocation and sizing for electric buses, they are actually considering the associated greenhouse gas emission and monetary cost for this infrastructure system. So when you transfer knowledge from the literature, looking into, per se, the infrastructure system required for this city will cost you this much, it means that these are actually studied together. So the infrastructure system is optimized to minimize the cost and the emission. On the other side, when you look again into infrastructure system and topic 10, you will see that there is significant lack of intersectionality when you go into comparative analysis, which is topic 10, and infrastructure system, meaning that the research or researchers across the globe, they are not comparing or cross-examining different infrastructure system allocation for different case studies when it comes into electric buses. So when you carry on information related to infrastructure system, the unique characteristics of each case study will be embedded in this knowledge. So yes, we understand the cost and emission, but this cost and emission are actually examined for one specific case study. So when you actually would like to transfer the knowledge, make sure that you have a comparable case study to your operation in order to avoid the lack of comparative analyses. So we cannot generalize infrastructure system planning, the knowledge from infrastructure system planning across the all transit networks in Canada. However, you can select specific case studies that to a great extent will match your operation and then transfer the knowledge. So similarly here, and this was a big surprise for me, battery performance, you can see it's all yellow and orange. It means that there is very few intersectionality between battery performance across all 10 domains, despite the fact that battery fading or battery aging impact the loss of capacity in your battery will have a severe impact on the feasibility of electric buses. So this is a very important message. So when you are planning your electric bus infrastructure system, and here the focus on battery electric buses, make sure that you plan while considering the battery performance and the battery degradation. It's used in the literature under 3 names: battery aging, battery degradation, and battery loss of capacity. So this is extremely important because it will actually inform you if you will end up changing your battery packs midlife, similar to what we do midlife refurbish for a 12-year lifespan, or you actually over allocate battery capacity more than what you required at year 1 to make sure that at year 12, even considering my battery fading impact, I will still have enough juice in my battery to get the bus delivering their planned schedule. So just to wrap it up and highlight the key findings out of this knowledge series, I will try to make it under 10 minutes. So the first one is performance of a full e-transit network is yet to be reported in the literature, and the word performance includes all 10 items of knowledge domain that we actually identified. Most of the studies will tackle 1 or 2, maximum 5 domains, but not all of them in one single model. So be aware if you are carrying or borrowing information from previous best practices to identify what was not studied in these best practices, what was not considered in these best practices before you actually carry their finding and utilize their finding to inform your decision-making process. The second one, and this was extremely surprising, we didn't see only 2 studies out of the last 21 years that actually solicited transit provider perspective toward transit electrification. So we should blame the research environment or researchers more than transit providers, because we are actually trying to design a system without asking our clients what are the main constraints that they should that we should consider in our system design. So items like interlining, the cut and run for buses, scheduling, all of these are based on assumptions. So I'm not aware of any study that actually considered bus interlining when they optimize infrastructure system. I'm not aware of any study that actually considered the queuing procedures and the bus barn when they are actually parking overnight and what order they should be disseminating the buses. The rotation of the buses across the network, across operation, again, is not very well studied in the research environment. Homogeneous battery or homogeneous fleet versus heterogeneous fleet, meaning that you have like let's say 1/3 of your fleet having a small battery and 1/3 medium and 1/3 large. Most of the research studies are based on homogeneous battery. I understand the rationale for allowing flexibility and bus rotation. However, we didn't study the other side of the equation. Again, it's very clear that there is apparent lack of monetary support to give incentives to transit electrification, similar to the incentives that were actually allocated to electric vehicles. Across the globe, there are very generous incentives to promote EV use, however, not as equally generous when it comes into transit electrification or zero electric transit provision. The last one, again, surprising. Hopefully, I'm doing this study as we started a couple of months ago, and hopefully we will wrap it up in September, about what's the performance of e-transit network under disruption. Again, what will happen if you have power outage? What will happen if you have equipment malfunction? Let's say the charger is down. How this might cascade into reducing the level of service. At the end of the day, we are in the business of providing transit or mobility solution for people. So technology, in my perspective, should be as a second step. The first and very important step is to provide a high level of service to our customers. So in terms of policy recommendations, and based on this knowledge series, it's not based on the entire report, so each one will have policy recommendation. That first of all is about the procurement process, because we found very contradictory messages across the literature on different policies allowing or disallowing different procurement process. So
Some municipalities will allow leasing the batteries. Some other municipalities will not allow leasing the battery. So owning, leasing, financing, I think there should be more flexibility to enable transit providers to cherry pick the best option that will suit their operation. Again, monetary incentives to enable transit providers to study, analyze, and test electric buses. So this is capacity development is extremely important when it comes into transit electrification, because at the end of the day, transit providers will be at the forefront of the implementation. So they should have all the knowledge required to deal with transit electrification. And surprisingly, we didn't see any research study in the literature that actually initiated from a transit agency or an R&D arm for transit provider. So at operational level, again, like echoing the cascading failure and the cascading impact, there should be set guidelines and policies for safeguards to address cascading impact. So if you have your design based on minimization cost function, so let's say you're actually minimizing infrastructure allocation, this will eventually lead to severe cascading impact and severe disruption on the system. So there should be an overcapacity allocation of your infrastructure to overcome the cascading impact. And hopefully in a month or two, I will give some numerical value about this overcapacity. The last one, technology awareness and knowledge mobilization, educational program. Again, echoing the same for monetary incentives to increase internal capacity. Again, try to link education program to stakeholders, namely transit providers. So there must be a way to create new programs which will actually very briefly, a very intense training courses that will enable transit providers to get first-hand knowledge related to electric bus planning, operation, and optimization, because it's not an apple-to-apple replacement. Transit industry have significant and superior experience when it comes into diesel, CNG, and other types of technology. However, electric buses or like fuel cell or any type of zero emission buses is considered new technology. So we must pave the road per se, just to enable them educational programs and training courses that will increase and enhance their internal capacity. So for transit providers, and this is again 4 key messages driven from this analysis, we don't have enough knowledge related to battery degradation impact on the 12-year operation. So again, this is a very initial research. We doing this study right now, but you should plan for at least 2% battery fading each year if you are using lithium-ion battery in cold weather in Canada. So cold weather here is referring to Ontario and Montreal, sorry, and Quebec. So basically, if you're further north and you have extremely cold weather, this fading impact or the degradation percentage might increase. If you have warmer weather similar to BC, this percent might actually reduce. So we need to study this, and you, like transit providers, need to be very careful about the impact, because literally your bus will cover 340 kilometer, let's hypothetical range. In year 1, in year 12, this might reduce to 250. So if your operation requires more than 250, your bus will not be able to achieve this operation in year 12. Resiliency and robustness of e-bus system under disruption is not well studied. So when you are planning your network, please consider over allocation of resources when it comes into infrastructure system, because this will enhance the resiliency and robustness and will mitigate any cascading impacts due to disruptive event. So this is very important, because based on the interviews that we had, most of transit industries are doing a route level feasibility analysis. And this is not, let's say, very informative when it comes into the network. So at the planning stage, you should focus on a system level planning, not a route level planning, and the system level feasibility not a route level feasibility. And then you start allocating resources over the route, over each route based on the priority of implementation. So route level based feasibility will lead to misallocation of resources. So you will end up either spending more money or misallocating the placement of your charging station, or having inappropriate sizing of your charging station. So the rated power, the number of pulleys coming out of your charging station, and the location. If you follow route feasibility, you will actually enhance the route, optimize the route, but not necessarily optimize the entire network. So technology awareness, educational program are required. So I highly encourage all transit providers to seek fund from different levels of governments to enhance internal capacity, because at the end of the day, as a researcher, we can do as much. However, we don't deliver the service. It's on transit provider to deliver the service. So they must be fully prepared to deal with any disruption and any hiccups during operation. So this concludes the first knowledge series, and the second one, hopefully in 2 weeks or a month, we will, based on reading all these articles and based on best practices, we will create the so-called implementation guidelines, do and don't. So very brief webinar and presentation telling you what are the key lessons that we have learned throughout our analyses, and what you should do when you at different stages of the implementation, and what you should avoid at different stages of implementation. Hopefully this will help you to get a more informed decision when it comes into the implementation of electric buses. So I'd like to thank you again, and again repeat the same message. I'd like to acknowledge support from NRCan, and please, I encourage all of you to disseminate the knowledge across all the Canadian transit industry. You will see the full report available here, as well as the URL for the PowerPoint presentation and the URL for this webinar. So I hope you are enjoying your summer, and I will contact you again, or my colleagues will actually deliver the second webinar, hopefully in 2 to 3 weeks. Okay, have a good one. Bye.